believe that step 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. I believe that that step refers to a basic blueprint, a relational blueprint that God has laid out for us. In Genesis chapter 1, and you'll see this on your handout, God said, let us, here God is saying us, make man in our image. 100 times. What's this? That's God. That's right. God, the us, exists, has his being in relationship. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. They are 3 separate personalities, all expressing God. Together, one. Now, yeah, it's a mystery. And one, quite honestly, I kind of see it and I kind of don't. But I get it because I'm actually beginning to experience a little bit of this usness in my own experience in a little bit of a way. So when God says, let us, a collaborative effort within God and the 3 persons of the Godhead together, make man. So here, I've written another example. Again, this is on your handout here. I put godly human design. God, I put in Christ. We have me and you, and we have other people. Now, out of convenience, I became this. And as a little boy going to church, I learned that when I went out and did bad things, like had bad thoughts about Mary Lou, and my bad thoughts about women started when I was like 6. I was an early starter. So when guys at 12, 13 years old were going into adolescence, I was kind of laughing at them like, you're just now catching up. But I was taught that all I had to do was just go tell God and confess my sins to God, and everything was made right. The problem was now I was sinning so much that, I mean, every time I sinned, I had to run back to God again. And hopefully I didn't die before I got back to God again because I'd sinned a whole lot more. And all along, I was getting more and more sense of being alone and more isolated and confused as to whom this might be. And God help me if anyone here ever knew what was going on with me. Because I knew what it was like to have the truth about my life exposed and to be vulnerable and to tell someone how I really felt or what was really going on with me, and I got punished for it. Am I the only one in the room that ever had that experience? No, I didn't think so. You see, by what you just did for me, you connected with me. You gave me a little bit of empathy right there. In fact, Jesus, God incarnate in man, was God's ultimate expression of empathy. You know what? He could have done anything he wanted to do to communicate his forgiveness, to solve the sin problem. But Jesus is a way for God to tell you that he gets it. He was a human being. And you know what happened to him? He got killed. He got killed for being the ultimate expression of God's care for man. And he conquered. So this is the backdrop for our step 5. This is the diagram for your step 5. Now, we'll push this aside, then we'll go on. So let's talk about honesty with God. In Genesis 3, a story we've all heard before, many times, I'm sure, when they heard the sound of God strolling in the garden in the evening breeze, the man and his wife hid in the trees of the garden, hidden from God. Boy, doesn't that have like a familiar ring to it? Does to me. God called to the man, "Hey, where are you?" The man said, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid." God said, who told you you were naked? Did you eat from that tree I told you not to eat from? Now we'll stop right there. You know what this sounds like to me? It sounds like a parent with their 5-year-old. Now, the kids, the picture of my childhood here. I'm in my Sunday clothes. I don't stay inside. I went out back, and I grew up in Houston where it rained and was muddy all the time, and I got my Sunday clothes all muddy, and I walked in, and Mom would say, David, did you go outside? No, I didn't go outside. Well, how did your clothes get all muddy? I'm caught. This is from the Message translation. I love this translation because it talks about the gentleness and the patience of parent God. How he was really dealing with the reality of the moment. And God's all-knowing. He saw this whole thing go down. And he didn't come into the garden and say, oh my goodness, what did you do, you stupid? You did exactly what I told you not to. He didn't do that. He engaged in an appropriate manner for his children. All while giving them the full dignity of the truth. It goes on to say, God made leather clothing for Adam and his wife and dressed them. So I'm just going to take this quick little thing. So the result here is that God allowed Adam and Eve the full freedom to make their choices. He didn't even stop them. And you know what? He didn't punish them. He dialogued with them about it, straight-faced, in an appropriate parental manner. And then while they were trying to cover their nakedness up with fig leaves, well, I bet that was comfy, he made them custom clothes. Wow. The picture, the gentleness. Man, I wish someone had told me that when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I discovered this till I was in my 40s. And I carry it with me every day. Because I'm still a sinner that somehow or another can't seem to make the right decision all the time. The decision is I've learned to come out of hiding a little quicker. And I've learned to come to grips with the fact that fig leaves will never feel good. I want to read you a quote here. Thomas Burton. My false and private self is the one who wants to exist outside the reach of God's will and God's love, outside of reality and outside of life. And make no mistake, reality and life go hand in hand. If you want a good life, get in touch with reality. And such a self cannot help but be an illusion. Now, as we've done here before, I've asked some readers, and I love you guys for reading, because for me, your reading and the dialogue that you shared with the rest of us here in attendance here and with me is huge. The first one is Miss Heather, and we got the mic coming up here. And so read along while Heather reads, and then we'll chat. I'm sorry?
Getting honest about the details of our lives is the most powerful thing we can do to strengthen our intimate connection with God. Honesty puts us on the same page with Him. Knowing that He knows everything about us, there is no reason to hide what's inside of us anymore. When we get honest with God, we cash the check, so to speak. We open ourselves up and receive the grace that He has already provided for us through Christ. Step 5 is not a religious exercise. So it's important that we don't over-spiritualize this aspect of our recovery. We're just admitting, with as much detail as we can, what God already knows.
Yeah, go ahead.
I really like the notes underneath too.
Yeah.
Be honest with God about your fears and doubts and poor decisions and mistakes. Be open to God's intimate care, recognizing He knows everything with compassion Be willing to give up the fig leaves you made for yourself and receive the care God has for you.
Great. You're a great reader. Thanks. You must have did good in school, I bet. So share with me and the rest of us your thoughts from what you read there.
So the part that I guess I'm just going to go from instinct, what stands out to me the most. In my situation, I'm used to being the person to fend for myself. I don't ask for help. My mother knows this, my family knows this, and it's a big problem, especially when you're dealing with a problem.
Yeah.
Like unless you reach out to me, I might accept it, but I have abandonment issues from my past. So.
And you're the only one.
Yeah, I'm the only one. It's just me. So being honest about what's going on and being willing to open up and just go through all the details is really hard for me. Sometimes I feel like it's painful going through the past and trying to understand why I'm in the situation I'm in. But I know that's the most crucial part of it. Like I have a select group of friends where I share what's going on with them, just with them. And it feels like the biggest sense of release to just get it off my chest and off my shoulders. Because we're not meant to suffer alone. A good friend of mine, who's also a believer too, like drilled that into me. You don't have to do this alone at all. You should never have to. And it's interesting because God's timing is very on time. And it's not funny. It's not even a coincidence. And it just helped to have someone understand me like that. And I feel like when you let down your guard and you let God in, He goes in full force. It's amazing who comes into your life to help you or to just kind of pick you up and you're down. And I experienced that after my situation from 5 months ago. I was in an abusive situation. Much abusive, which is just as bad as physical. And the people who stepped up, I didn't even I was just crying out in prayer and they just called. I never anticipated it to happen. It was every single time. I just lost it. Someone was there to help me out. And it was like I know it's him up there. I always look up and I always say thank you because I know it's God every time. I don't need reassurance that he's there helping me. Sometimes I feel like I do because I feel like I need to take care of me. I'm so used to take care of me. No one else takes care of me. But without God behind anything, he is here to take care of us. And we have to be willing to surrender our ego and our will to just fend for ourselves. And we're not meant to do it alone.
Well, next week we'll be hearing from Heather. Can I ask a question? How would you, in a brief thought or something, how would you compare your basic human existence when you were operating under this impression or this dominant thought that you had to solve your own problems and you were on your own, like it or not, and then to transition and have this experience where you're realizing that God will bring to you, through people and other means, everything that you need. So, what's like the before and the after?
Before it felt heavy, after it felt light. But it was hard.
Great words.
But I feel like it's really that simple. Like it takes the weight off your shoulder. And I needed to experience that and really feel that to understand that. And
let me stop you right there. Because this is what you have just nailed it. It's hard, but it's simple. In fact, it is so hard because it is so simple. And the weight of it and the change of it it defies common sense. And everything about this life where God is going to be bringing things to you, elements of spiritual experience that defy common sense. And it's for you and God working together for you to learn that the spiritual experience will rule the common sense. And it never makes sense until you're already having been drugged through the knothole. And then you look back and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for that knothole. Yeah. So thank you. Okay. Honesty with ourselves. Jesus' words in Matthew. And by the way, these, as you see from your handouts, all from the Message. The Message, I don't know if you know this, but Eugene Peterson wrote it for crackheads, so it's my favorite version. It makes sense to me, and I'm grateful for that. But Jesus says, you're blessed when you're content with just who you are, no more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that cannot be bought. Brennan Manning, the heart is the deepest essence of a person. It symbolizes what's at our core. The heart of the matter is that we can know and be known only through revealing what's in our heart. So, I can spend 15 minutes on that, but I'm not. I'm going to refer to my friend Ira. I must tell you, I'm selfish. I find it much more interesting when our readers are reading and their thoughts than it is for me. I hope the rest of you don't mind, but there we go. Ira, what you got there? Oh, go ahead.
In the past, we've seen ourselves through a lens of deception and secrets. Now, we throw off the blinders so that we can see ourselves more realistically. By admitting to ourselves the truth about ourselves, we become better integrated with the reality of life. The holes inside of us get plugged up, and the bleeding stops. The broken pieces of our hearts and minds start to find our right places again. We become ready to receive God's compassion and care, which will take root in the very places where our personal deceptions have lived. This blows the lid off the box that our addictions have placed us in, our identity, that we're made in the image of God, and finds new life as we become connected with God in this way. Beyond,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to sign the trip time.
Yeah.
Be honest about your strengths and responsibilities, your weakness and vulnerabilities. Be open to cultivating your interpersonal world with God, to resources beyond yourself. Be willing to change how you live, which bring about changes in how you think.
Thank you, Ira. And your thoughts for the rest of this, please.
Well, I kind of got stuck with the first sentence, and I was really grateful for the second sentence. And that we, at times, when life is rough, and of course when we're getting sober, life is just full of rough patches, that we're so full of deceptions and secrets that we don't see a way out. And when I first came here, I didn't see a way out. I didn't really see how God could provide a way out. And through the fifth step, a lot of what I thought was just never to be heard by anybody at any time cleared away what we call the wreckage of the past in my heart and my mind. And it really helped open me up to God and His Holy Spirit, and to receive the gift of love from others and from God, which I really have no idea of what that was all about and what that could feel like. So it was just an imperative that I didn't understand, other than the fact that those around me, like the four steps, said, if you don't do this, you're going to go back out and you're going to get high again. And I didn't want to do that no matter what.
Thank you. Thank you, Ira. Ira mentioned or alluded to something that I believe about our God, and that once we begin to be honest with God to the best of our ability, God provides a grace that helps us to be honest with ourselves. We don't get honest with ourselves and then go get honest with God. That's why step 5 is step with God, with ourselves, and another human being. I believe that there's an important stepping stone there relationally. I think that God, just like with Adam and Eve, he knew what had been going on. And he understood that they really didn't understand what was going on. Yeah, they knew that they ate the fruit that they weren't supposed to eat. But on the other hand, they were just taking a bite of the fruit. They didn't understand all of the eternal connectedness of all of that. God did. God understands why we've done the things we've done. We found ourselves in places in life where life was bigger and more dangerous than we could handle. Our addictions didn't start when we just started drinking. We were set up in somehow or another. Yeah, there's a vulnerability for alcoholism. There's a vulnerability for a lot of different kinds of chemical addictions. There's family histories. There's evidence of some genetic predispositions. But there's also things like trauma. Huge link between trauma and addiction. Huge link. And we find ourselves being confronted with a life experience of pain and sorrow, so that the things that we do, like the drinking or the controlling or the manipulating or the gambling or all those other things that I was so good at, they made sense. Given the power of that hopeless despair of experience, they made sense. Common sense. And God gets that. So, we come in and we admit our weakness and vulnerability. My goodness, what a dangerous thing to do. I remember when I was 25, I told my dad, "Dad, I think I'm an alcoholic." And I remember him jumping off the couch and screaming and yelling at me, "Don't you ever tell anybody that. Don't you ever drink again." Okay, I promise. No, I never told him about my drinking again, I'll tell you that. Am I related to stories like that? No. So, okay. Honesty with another person. I put appropriately here. Step 5 says we made it, we tell the truth to God, to ourselves, and another human being. And it really speaks specifically to one person. And if we have time, I'll actually share with you a little bit about my step 5 experience. But I also add a little something here just for some informational thing, given this opportunity here, to talk about appropriate conversation and community. I believe that for the sake of your recovery and work in the process of 12-step recovery, it is essential that you have no secrets. Now, if you have 1, 2, or 3 people that know everything about you, or have, between them, you share with things that you feel they can handle appropriately, and you can be safe in, that's fine. The idea is that you are not left alone with your secrets. And I do believe it's important to start learning to have an expanded world of transparency where we can live transparently in appropriate settings. Now, that doesn't mean you go around the office telling people that you're a recovering alcoholic. I did some of that stuff in my early recovery, and 18 years later, I kind of regret some of that. So, James 5:16. Make this your common practice. Confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you can live together whole and healed. And this is actually, it's from one of my books. I found it somewhere. By getting real and being honest with others, we make ourselves available to be loved by them. Both Ira and Heather said the same thing in different words. And my Kit, where's lovely Kit? There she is. Let's give Jesse a moment. Oh, Jack is coming to you. And we'll get the mic here. All right, Kit, would you read for us? Thank you.
With whom are we going to get real? To whom will we get honest and make our admissions? Some general guidelines will help us find the right kind of person who will help us make the most of our Step 5 experience. It is important for us to understand first and foremost that there is no one particular person who can completely accept us and all that we are in total love. Giving total and complete love is Jesus' job. No one can do that for us but Him. The purpose of getting real and honest with another person is so that we can experience redemption and restoration at a social level with other human beings. We need to tell our listener about what we have habitually thought about ourselves, other people, and God. Speaking to another person about our deepest reality means that we do not discuss the faults and mistakes of other people. Right now, at this point in time, problems and faults of others are not our concern. Focusing on the problems that other people have created for us will only deepen our resentment and anger. Let's stick with the facts about ourselves. Be honest about your struggles, your problems, and your limitations. Be open to see diversity as strength in community. Be willing to accept forgiveness and become socially responsible, making changes.
Great reader, Kit. Thank you. Share with us your thoughts, please.
I have written out everything for Step 4, and I have a number to call someone for Step 5, and I find this extremely helpful because it's scary.
Yeah.
And you can't help thinking they're going to judge you. I don't know what this means. Be open to see diversity as strength in community.
I'll follow up with that in a few minutes.
Okay. But everything else about this program seems to be working. And so
Say that again, please.
everything else about this program seems to be working.
I'm sorry.
It's amazing how great this program is working. Hallelujah. But then it helps me to trust that this person will be able to handle, because maybe she's had an even rougher time. Who knows?
Can I ask you a brief question? A month ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, could you imagine sitting here with a microphone in your face, reading this and having this conversation?
Absolutely not.
Leave it right there. Right. You're living courageously. I think I'm going to have enough time here. I want to share with you my Step 5 briefly. I mean, I'm not going to share with you the exact nature of my logs because it'll totally get edited out of the tape. But I'll speak to that broad diversity thing. And by the way, this is why we have a fellowship. You know, we got, 70 people here? No one has the same story. But by living out this process of discovering God's love for each of us, the first way we begin to discover that is when we see it in the lives of someone else who's even sicker and crazier than we ever were. Whew, what a relief! So Jesus prayed this for you, kid, and all of us. I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one. As you are in me, Father, and I am in you. Now, when you go back to the diagrams of God in the Trinity and the similar diagram of godly human design, allow that verse to blend into that diagram. And let that be for you. And I think many of us, and by the way, I'm a believer that long before we ever get addicted to a thing, we're probably in an addicted relationship, codependent. Probably a parent. First, when we were kids, we don't know that. We don't know what it was like to grow up and to begin to have a healthier, more independent, emotionally autonomous relationship with our parents. And we stay kind of emotionally wound up around the drama of their life. So, I spoke last week about the box and how that kind of launched me into doing my step 4. My step 4 turned out to be 40 pages, and because I just sat down there at my computer, I had since found out, and I really encourage you to take a pen and a piece of paper and use a journal. If you type, that's okay, that's fine. But it's actually a better process, health-wise, to do it the old school way. But however you do it, just do it. Believe me, I didn't do my recovery work well. I was motivated by pain and fear, and it worked. So my sponsor, Bob, was in the hospital. But I had a second sponsor, kind of a fill-in pinch hit sponsor named George. And I saw George at the meeting, at the 7 a.m. meeting down in Dana Point. I said, George, I did my 4th step. And I said, would you go over it with me and let me do my 5th step? He said, yeah. Bring me a copy tomorrow. So I bring him a copy in a manila envelope sealed, and to everybody get their hands on this, and I gave it to George, and I go, here. He goes, okay, hey, I'm ready. I saw him the next morning. He said, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. And then I saw him the next day. He said, yeah, I'm getting through it. I'll call you this afternoon. He called me later on that afternoon. He said, can you come over on Sunday about 2 o'clock? Come on over to the house. But I did. I showed up at 2 o'clock. He walks in and he gives me a nice tea, and we sit down, and he goes, David, I'm just a simple alcoholic. I didn't do all this stuff. And I was like, oh man, I'm in for it. But he said, I read every word of it. He said, I felt grief. I said, what? Grief? What does that have to do with it? And at least that's what I was thinking. I didn't say anything. He said, there's just such sadness here. I didn't write about sadness. I wrote about a guy who couldn't stay sober and couldn't stop doing drugs and kept getting in trouble with women and all kinds of stuff. And it was just... And he saw sadness. And then he started just talking about the specific things in there and heartbreak. What George was doing, he was pointing me beyond the obvious to see the underlying issues. He had a glimpse of God's perspective. He saw that I wasn't just a guy who couldn't stay sober. I was a sad, broken-hearted guy. They couldn't find a reason to stay sober. I took that home with me from George's house. A couple of weeks later, Bob gets out of the hospital, and we're talking, and he said, no, you know what? We haven't done your step 5. I said, no, I did it with George. He goes, no, I'm your sponsor. You're doing it with me. So Bob and I would meet at this little pastry shop down in Aliso Viejo. It had a little outdoor patio where we could sit there and smoke cigarettes, and people wouldn't be too afraid to bothered by us. So I met him there early evening. I brought my 40 pages, I hand down, and he sits down and lights a cigar and starts reading. And he's reading, and he's reading, and he's reading, and he would chuckle. And then he would get squinty-eyed. He'd like move around in his chair, and he kept reading, and then he'd chuckle again. And the whole time I'm chain smoking cigarettes and stuffing my face full of pastry. And then he gets to the last page, and I see him going through the pages, and I'm so glad. It takes him almost an hour to read this thing. And he looks at me and he goes, "Is that it?" I go, "What do you mean that's it?" He goes, "Well, is there anything you wanted to add?" No, I don't have anything to add. He goes, "Man, I did all the same stuff." And he starts laughing. And he starts telling me the story about this girlfriend that he had, and they stole tires. And how he and this girl would do all these crazy things and steal tires and get in trouble. And he was laughing and joking. And I'm sitting here watching this man just bare his ridiculous soul to me with humor and self-deprecation, but never with a self-insult. Now, what Bob did for me, it may sound kind of callous and shallow, but Bob helped me to see that a change in perspective can happen about my past. It didn't always have to be the pulling of the teeth that it had been. Those were my 2-step 5s. Completely different perspectives, tremendous diversity, because they were completely different people. What they gave me was they gave me guidance and challenge to see the underlying issues with care and thoughtfulness and compassion. And old Bob, him and his crazy tire-stealing girlfriend, they gave me empathy. You know, it is scientifically proven that the trauma your brain has experienced from whatever happened to you that created pain, and also from the actual addictions that you've, abused yourself with. Make no mistake, addiction is self-abuse. And we're just kind of continuing a pattern that started long before we started it. The net result is we have neurological injury to our brain systems. But when we tell the truth about our lives to someone, and they offer back to us empathy, common ground, shared experience, we're all in this together. Not just that, "Oh, I feel bad for you." Because you know what? I don't need any more of that crap. I need someone to say, "Me too." That will heal your brain. That will heal your heart. You know, I've been doing things like this now for off and on for 6-7 years. And last year, a year before last, my father passed away. And with him passing away, I made the decision that I was going to become more all in my work. And as I've gotten to know you folks, some of you as individuals, and have gotten to know you as a community, you are giving me a place where I am finding myself much more inclined to be personal from up here. By the way, being up here is, I enjoy it, but not as much as I enjoy being down there. So I owe you all a debt. I look forward to next week, and I look forward to finishing out this series over the next 7 weeks. I'm deeply grateful for you. That's it for tonight. See you next week.